Blake hadn't expected the email. Not at 9:43 p.m. Not from her. The firm had just wrapped up a tense mock trial round for one of their biggest pharmaceutical clients. And he was still nursing the adrenaline in his bones when the message landed. You defended a lost cause better than most defend real ones. Wine to celebrate. No signature. No need. He read it 3 times. Unsure if the meaning lay in the compliment or the invitation. Or both. 3 months earlier, Blake had walked through the revolving glass doors of Foster and Hayward with the energy of someone ready to fight giants. At 26, he was the youngest litigation associate in a firm built on prestige and pedigree. A Stanford law graduate, Argentine-born and Pacific Northwest bred. He carried himself with a calm that belied his hunger. Sharp suits, clean manners, no family in town. He was a man without distractions. But even excellence had limits here. The firm was a pyramid. And he was still looking for the hand that would pull him up. That hand, it seemed, belonged to Amelia Grant. He met her at the firm's fall gala, hosted in the glass atrium of the Columbia Tower. Amelia was not loud. She didn't need to be. She arrived in a deep black velvet gown, her posture elegant, her presence magnetic. Partner, senior, 10 trials won and none lost. She was the kind of success that didn't announce itself but waited for you to catch up. Blake had seen her before. In passing, her husband, Henry Grant, was one of the founding members of the firm, now semi-retired and often absent. Amelia was his legacy made flesh. And no one doubted she carried more weight in internal votes than her title suggested. They were introduced briefly at the bar. He expected a nod, maybe a polite smile. Instead, she held his gaze, just a second too long. You're Blake Santiago, aren't you? The one who quoted Cicero in the litigation draft. Yes, I thought no one noticed. Oh, we notice everything. Her smile was light, but her eyes weren't. They stayed on him as if searching for the right use. In the weeks that followed, Blake found himself in her orbit more than coincidence could explain. He was asked to assist with a case she was overseeing. Then with a cross-examination prep she led. Then a presentation at a clients-only roundtable where she praised his disciplined eloquence in front of 2 managing partners. She didn't touch him, didn't flirt, but her presence bent the air. And then, the email. The idea of declining felt foolish. Blake wasn't naive, but he wasn't arrogant either. If this was a test, he needed to pass it. If it was something else, he wasn't sure. He replied with a single word, when. They met the next evening at a wine bar nestled behind a bookstore in Capitol Hill. The place was dim, walls lined with bottles instead of books. She arrived in a navy coat and boots that clicked like punctuation. She ordered for them both without asking. Cabernet, 99. It won a trial I lost the year before. I trust it more than people. Blake chuckled, but she didn't laugh. Instead, she watched him sip, evaluating. They didn't speak about law. Not directly. She asked about his childhood in Buenos Aires. His transition to Washington State. He spoke of cold mornings. Immigrant parents. Scholarship fights. You know how to sound like the underdog, she said, while still winning. That's rare. He wanted to respond, but something in her voice cut deeper than praise. Like she was drawing lines on a map only she could read. As they parted outside, she put her hand lightly on his arm. You belong here, Blake, but don't expect the rules to be fair. Just learn who writes them. That night, Blake lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't in love, not even infatuated, but he couldn't sleep. He thought about the way she looked at him when she said, belong. Like a door cracked just enough for an offer to slip through. He thought he was being noticed. But maybe he was being selected. 3 days later, during a firm-wide meeting, she entered late and sat beside him. Their elbows nearly touched. She didn't look at him. But when she passed him her notes for a clause revision, there was a small line in the corner of the page. Not all promotions come from performance. Some come from proximity. His breath hitched. Was this real? The next day, she CC'd him on a case file he wasn't assigned to. She wrote, "Thought you'd enjoy the argument structure." He knew, then, This wasn't random, and it wasn't a game. It was a selection process. And he was already inside it. His friends back in law school used to joke, "You either climb by work or by whispers." Blake had always thought he'd climb by work. But now, whispers were louder. He opened his laptop, clicked back to that first email. Read it again, whined to celebrate, then stared at his reflection in the black screen. "I thought I was just getting promoted," he whispered to himself, not propositioned. The text from Amelia came just past midnight. "I like your tie today." That was all, no salutation, no emoji, but Blake stared at it for longer than he should have, thumb hovering over the keyboard, uncertain if he should reply at all. In the end, he didn't, but he dreamt of her that night anyway, her eyes scanning a courtroom. Her laugh tucked inside the curve of a wineglass. It became a rhythm. Every other evening, a message, sometimes short, "You always seem to know when to say the right thing," sometimes vague. But never fully platonic. They didn't reference the office. They didn't make direct propositions. But the space between what was said and what wasn't grew thinner. Like a glass wall fogging under pressure. On a Wednesday evening, the litigation team stayed late to review a sensitive case file. Amelia joined, uncharacteristically, when the others left around 10:30. She lingered. Blake was about to shut his laptop when she glanced over and said, "Stay, just a few minutes. I want to go over the Grant case one more time." He nodded, unsure whether he wanted to or felt compelled to. In the glass conference room on the 19th floor, Seattle stretched like a circuit board, light grids, faint clouds, a trace of the sound. Amelia removed her heels, sat cross-legged on the leather chair, and flipped through a printed brief. "You always bring clarity to chaos," she murmured, half to herself. "That's generous," he replied. She looked up, her gaze held longer than expected. "You don't understand what it's like, do you, to be noticed only when convenient? To be exceptional, but never exceptional enough to matter more than a man's schedule?" Blake opened his mouth to speak, but didn't. Amelia stood, walked to the window. He followed, as if drawn by her orbit. When she turned to him, the movement was slow, like a decision already made hours ago. She reached up, adjusted his collar slightly, and let her fingers rest just a moment too long. Then came the light touch on his wrist. The silence, the gravity. They kissed, not urgently, not messily, like two people inhaling the same lie and pretending it was truth. He didn't sleep at her place. She didn't invite him, but when he reached home, the echo of her perfume clung to his shirt like an answer he didn't want. The next morning, a file was on his desk. Annotated, color-coded, with a sticky note in Amelia's handwriting, "You've earned a seat at more than just the table." Blake read it 5 times, then stored it in the bottom drawer. He told himself this wasn't about ambition, that it wasn't about moving faster than the hierarchy allowed. It was personal, real, but deep down, in a voice he wouldn't admit even to himself. He knew, Amelia hadn't just chosen him for comfort. She had chosen him because she could. And he let her, because he wanted to matter. The boundary had been crossed. Softly, elegantly, but irrevocably. The apartment near Lake Union was staged like a design showroom, everything in muted tones and deliberate lighting. Like desire curated into aesthetic. Amelia referred to it as their neutral ground, a phrase that both soothed and unsettled Blake. It suggested safety, yet also implied war without uniforms, without declarations, just strategies, positions, and silence. They met every Thursday at 7 p.m. Always punctual, always discreet. She brought gifts, a Mont Blanc pen one week, a vintage bottle of Barolo the next. On his birthday, she handed him a Cartier watch without ceremony, simply saying, "You wear time well. You don't have to keep doing this," Blake had said once, turning the box over in his hands. Amelia only smiled. "I know, but I like to reward good judgment." The sex was always slow, precise, like negotiations. There was no fumbling, no chaos. Even in intimacy, Amelia led like she was closing a deal. She didn't surrender, she curated. Each touch, each breath was layered in implication. But what lingered after wasn't the physical. It was her voice, whispering promises of introductions to board members. Name drops of senior partners who were suddenly curious about Blake. In those moments after, as they lay in silence beside each other, Blake would watch the city shimmer outside the window and wonder what version of himself he had stepped into. The confident associate, the kept man, the future partner, or just another name on Amelia's long list of clever, ambitious toys. At work, his world tilted. Colleagues noticed. Files that should have taken a week were returned in 3 days. Missing citations, dotted with errors. His supervisor sent him a terse note. "You're smarter than this." Focus. One of the associates, a cynical third-year named Jenna, passed him in the break room and murmured, "Must be nice to have someone upstairs rooting for you." Blake wanted to deny it. Wanted to explain the late nights, the pressure, the imposter syndrome, but he said nothing, because she wasn't wrong, and he wasn't ready to confront the fact that his effort now walked in tandem with Amelia's influence. Amelia became possessive. Slowly, she'd ask about his social media activity, why he liked a female paralegal's vacation photo, why he smiled so long at the barista downstairs. Her tone was always playful, almost maternal, but the subtext scraped like a nail behind velvet. "I'm not jealous," she said once, brushing dust off his shoulder in the hallway. "I just think you've forgotten whose name is on your next recommendation." And that was the thing. She never yelled, never accused, but her reminders were velvet ropes, tightening gently, and Blake, half hypnotized by the future she dangled, didn't resist. He rationalized it. "She's helping me. She sees me. She wants me to win." But when she started suggesting he skip company events unless she attended, when she criticized him for laughing too easily with interns, the rope cinched tighter. He began to cancel casual lunches, stopped replying to texts that weren't strictly professional. He even unfollowed a few colleagues online, just in case. Then came the folder. One Thursday, she arrived holding a sleek leather dossier. Inside, a detailed proposal for an international joint venture her husband had spent months negotiating, one not yet public. Not even finalized. She placed it in Blake's lap. "If you ever want your own firm," she said, uncorking the Barolo, "this is your blueprint." Blake stared at the documents. Charts, contact names, preliminary figures. It was everything. Too much. "Why are you showing me this?" Amelia sipped her wine. "Because I believe in talent. Because I'm tired of watching men hand opportunities to mediocre protégés. Because if you're going to matter, you need a head start." He didn't sleep that night. He walked around Lake Union instead, hands deep in his coat pockets, the cold slicing through the fog of wine and guilt. The city looked clean and distant, like a dream built by people who didn't bleed. His footsteps echoed in his mind, the rhythm of a man running in place. Was this generosity, manipulation, or just another form of seduction? He remembered her hand on his chest, just before she left, saying, "Use it, or don't, but don't pretend you weren't ready." By the end of the week, he had scanned the proposal, memorized parts of it. The thought of using it flickered like a pilot light inside him, steady, quiet, waiting for fuel. He still hadn't decided what he would do, but a voice inside him had already started drafting emails. And another voice, a quieter, more human one, had started asking, "Who is she really? And who am I becoming?" The web was spun, and Blake was no longer sure who had caught whom, or if they both wanted to be caught all along. The video clip was exactly 13 seconds long. Grainy, but unmistakable. Amelia and Blake. Elevator. Late night. Her hand brushing against his tie. His fingers grazing her hip. Just enough to silence deniability. It hit the firm like a slow-moving avalanche. No screams. No accusations. Just a quiet recalibration of faces in corridors and whispered questions behind closed doors. The clip arrived via encrypted email. No sender, no note, just the subject line, "For your ethics committee." Blake was in a deposition meeting when HR knocked. He stepped out and never returned. A suspension notice waited in his inbox. Within an hour, his access to the firm's server was revoked. By end of day, the managing partner's office had called an emergency ethics review. He hadn't even seen Amelia that day, or the next. Grant, her husband, the towering name on the firm's letterhead, said nothing. No confrontation, no drama, just a legal complaint filed with the internal board, citing breach of professional conduct, conflict of interest, and actions compromising the integrity of litigation strategy. Blake read it in silence. 3 pages. Clinical, surgical, no emotion, just precision. The kind that made it hard to breathe. When he saw Amelia again, it was in the glass corridor between the east and west wings. She looked at him like a stranger, not cold, not angry, just distant, measured. "You knew this was a risk," she said. Her voice was quiet, calm, almost maternal. Blake's throat tightened. "Did you send it?" A pause, a blink, a shrug. "It was going to fall apart eventually. I just didn't think it'd be so fast." Then came the pivot. In her formal written statement to the ethics board, Amelia claimed, "The relationship began outside the bounds of professional consent. I felt pressured. I attempted to end it multiple times." Blake read that sentence 6 times. It didn't sound like her, but it sounded exactly like what the board wanted to hear. He was asked to submit his firm devices, his case notes, his last 3 months of correspondence. His mentor within the litigation team withdrew his recommendation letter. An upcoming speaking event, cancelled. His inbox, once filled with praise and banter, was now a graveyard of read receipts and silence. No one yelled, no one called him a liar, but everything vanished. Amelia, too, was not spared. The review board issued a suspension. Then, 2 weeks later, a vote. She was removed from the partnership circle. Her name, once etched into the etched glass by the front lobby, was quietly peeled off. No press release, no explanation, just the clean efficiency of institutional shame. Blake moved through it like a sleepwalker. He didn't pack his desk, didn't answer messages from friends, just watched the city from his apartment window, watching the world that had once seen him as brilliant, as promising, now blot him out like spilled ink on parchment. His world hadn't exploded, it had evaporated. There was no anger in him. Not yet, only a stunned, suspended sense of loss, not for Amelia, not even for the job, but for the version of himself who thought he was in control. The legal world, he now understood, didn't scream when it punished. It documented, it archived, it wrote your downfall into footnotes. And footnotes, Blake realized, are never read aloud. Tacoma was quieter than Seattle in every way that mattered. The rain still fell with a familiar rhythm, but the skyline was humbler, the air less charged. Blake rented a 1-bedroom above a tax consultancy office, the kind of place that didn't ask too many questions as long as the checks cleared. He worked odd hours, taking on freelance litigation summaries and ghostwriting appellate memos for boutique firms too small to care about who he used to be. His name was no longer Blake Mercer. On his business card, when he bothered to carry one, it read, David L. Crane. No LinkedIn, no bar association dinners, no drinks with former colleagues. His phone remained on silent, not out of paranoia but habit. Silence was the only voice he trusted now. He didn't talk to anyone about Seattle, not even to himself. There was no ceremony to his exit, no goodbye lunches, no handwritten notes, just a resignation email with no subject line and a single sentence, "Thank you for the opportunity." The only contact he maintained was with his landlord. The rent went out the first of every month. Beyond that, nothing tied him to any previous identity. If he died tomorrow, the firm would barely pause. But he still had the folder, the old case file, the one from his very first win as a junior associate, a pro bono eviction defense where he had written every page, prepped every witness, cross-examined like his life depended on it. He had kept it for sentiment at first. Now, it felt like a taunt. One Tuesday night, a cold one, he found himself staring at it again. The folder lay on the dining table beside an untouched microwave meal. He opened it. Read a few lines. His own annotations stared back. Young. Idealistic. Too many commas. He whispered to the room. Was I ever good? Or just useful? The answer didn't come. Only the hum of the old refrigerator answered, punctuated by the occasional screech of tires below. Then, the email arrived. No sender name, no message body, just a subject line. I wanted to feel wanted. But you wanted to feel important. He stared at it for a full minute. His cursor hovered over the trash icon. He clicked delete. He didn't read it again. Didn't wonder if it was Amelia. Because it didn't matter. What lingered was not the message, but what it unlocked. That night, Blake walked down to the waterfront. He brought the old folder with him. The wind whipped through his coat. The pages trembled in his hand. One by one, he tore them. The sound was not satisfying. Just final. He let the shreds fall into the water. Watched them vanish into the dark. There was no catharsis, just completion. Back at home, he looked in the mirror. Not out of vanity, he simply needed to know what version of himself had survived. His face looked older, not in age, but in weight, like a man who had carried someone else's dream too long and dropped it too late. He touched the glass, whispered, "She said I was different. But in the end, I was just dispensable." And then came the final thought, one that would echo through his nights for years. He thought he was playing the game. He didn't know. He was just the piece someone else moved first. The city didn't know his name anymore. But he remembered, and memory, he realized, is the most loyal punishment of all.